Hey guys, it's Toniko Pantoja, and today I want to talk about burnout again. Now, burnout is a recurring theme or a recurring topic that I talk about a lot in my channel. Now, for those who don't know what I mean when I'm talking about burnout, it's a state where you're exhausted creatively, but this also extends to mentally, physically, emotionally, and amongst other things. And this just leads you to being jaded, to be demotivated with continuing your creative work, to be highly anxious with your relationship with your work, and the quality of your creative work starts to suffer. Now, in this channel, I've talked about how I deal with my burnout or what I do to go through my burnout because it's just something that we all face. However, stuff that I didn't really elaborate on is things that have burned me out in the past, like what are some of the reasonings of that burnout, what led to me getting burned out, and I'm pretty sure that many of you guys can relate to all of these other reasons that are the cause of your burnout. And while I do talk about these reasons, I also do want to talk about the things that I'm actively doing to navigate through those specific reasons. Now, the first one I want to talk about are ambitious projects. These are big projects that are just so daunting to even think about. It could be how epic the story is or the amount of work needed for the project. It's when you realize that the scale of your project is just too big to see an end for it. You don't even know if you can finish it. Now, there's two solutions that I can personally think of. Shrink the project down to something that is fathomable, something that's easier to digest, and something that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel while working on it. Now, the reason why I fight for this is smaller projects are easier to finish, but they're also easier to manage for quality control, and you add more work done to your portfolio. And from my experience, getting something done actually builds confidence for me. You won't feel it at first, but you'll appreciate it over time. It's better to make something small and something that kicks ass more so than work on something for an endless amount of time. Either it never gets done, or when it finishes, it's a product that doesn't really have an identity. Now, if you have no choice, but you have to finish this ambitious project, you might just have to lock down. You can't think of the future steps. You can't think about what's going to happen to this project, how it's going to be received. At this point, it's just a marathon, and you just have to focus on the present task at hand. Or you reach out to people that might help you finish the project. The next one I want to talk about is the amount of labor or the many steps to finish a project. Now, what I do is specifically hand-drawn animation, and there's just a lot of steps to getting a finished film, from the rough doodles, the rough sketches to a fully finished film with full animation, a lot of color, post effects, compositing, etc. It's just a lot of work. In most cases, it's a bullshit amount of work, and sometimes that bullshit amount of work amounts to nothing. Now imagine doing that over and over again. It's just really tiring, it's monotonous and repetitive. Now, the solutions that I come up with for cases like this is to eliminate certain steps. What if I just reuse the same asset over and over again? What if my project doesn't use color? What if I just stick to black and white only? Saves a lot of time and energy. What if I don't fully in between my work? What if I only add 1 or 2 drawings in between my animation key poses? Now, another reason why I suggest this is that you're thinking less about how much labor there is and more about the challenge of trying to get something to work with such limitations. It gives you certain boundaries to work with and not having to worry about things that don't really matter. What I'm trying to say is you can say the same thing that you've always wanted to say without the bullshit labor. Let's talk about crunch time, because crunch time is probably the most common and crappiest things artists go through, and is one of the main causes of burnout. And it's super common for those working in the industry. It's when there's a lot of work compressed into a short amount of time to get the job done under a strict schedule. Over time, the repeated crunch time burns out an artist, making them less productive or being able to do good work. It's also quite an emotional toll. Now, I personally don't think there's any other solution other than taking breaks and just rest. But over time and over experience, you learn how to navigate through these things under pressure while working with creative projects. So when I do animation and storyboarding and I have to work through the crunch, I try to focus on the work that needs the most priority. So for animation, for example, I'll just worry about the key poses and figure out the in-betweens much later on. For storyboards, for example, I will make sure my overall sequence is pitchable with really rough drawings, clear beats and acting, clear storytelling versus making the drawings look good, which is a lot of time. I know for my student films, I wanted to focus more on getting better with my character animation, so I would actually rush my backgrounds or keep it as minimal as possible, knowing I want my animation to be more important. You kind of just have to lock in. Not worrying about the future steps, I would recommend taking a few steps back and seeing what is the thing that needs the most priority, that when you do it, you're in a more comfortable state. But it also requires a bit more experience and awareness with the work that you do. So knowing the steps, knowing what your capabilities are and how well you do within each steps, it's kind of that type of stuff that you might need to get experience and more awareness of so you can navigate through the crunch better. Now, the next reason, perfectionism. Now, this is a mentality of trying to get it good and right. And I think it's good to strive for good work, but you get to the point that you're never satisfied with whatever you come out with. And at the end of the day, you get nothing done because if it's not perfect, it's not worth pursuing. You don't even want to finish it because it's not in your ideal image. Now, I don't really have a perfect solution for this, but I keep 3 things in mind. Number 1 is that someone is always going to have a say about your work and point out the flaws and imperfections about your work, no matter how much work you put into it. Number 2 is reach a stage where it's done, and if you have the time, fix it later. If you don't have the time, address those weaknesses for future projects. The third one is something that my jiu-jitsu coach told me, which is in order to be great, you have to fail. You have to know what it's like to not get something right or to not get something perfect and screw up at times. And for the future, at least you have that awareness where you know what kind of pitfalls to watch out for and what kind of solutions you can come up with. The next one I want to talk about is you're just out of creative juice and ideas. Maybe you're just burned out from creativity or making creative decisions. You can't come up with ideas or solutions for your projects. Even trying to think about creative decisions just tires you out, or you just don't have the willpower to do so. So maybe when you're out of creative juice, maybe it's a good time to do something that is less creative and more just, work, more just labor. Maybe on another project or something that I did back then that's like really rough and really loose, maybe I can just use this time to just clean that piece of work up. Whether it's a drawing, whether it's a rough animation, the creative decisions are already made through that session of just sketching. Now I can just clean it up and make it look good while my creative juice recovers. Another thing that I do is I just do studies or I just draw in cafes, like sketch people at cafes or anywhere else. At least it's getting me to draw stuff, but I don't necessarily have to keep thinking about making new creative things. The next one I want to talk about is the drive to impress and win approval. Now, I sometimes wonder if social media actually elevated this, but I definitely wanted to show people my worth by making things that were impressive to them, that would turn heads, that would get likes, that would get shares. When it comes to the approval of people or expecting how people would react to your work, that is something that you cannot predict. And if you're dealing with the social media scene, you have to also think about if the algorithm has something to do with it. Like I said, you just have to remind yourself that when it comes to how people react with your work, it's a factor that you can't control. Not only is trying to target or impress certain people a good recipe for being burned out, but it's also going to make you lose your sense of identity because you're only catering to people and trying to win their approval. So something that I've been doing lately is that I don't really post much online anymore, or I've actually minimized my social media usage. I draw a lot still, and I actually have a lot more fun with it because I'm more in tune with myself and doing work that feels true to me. And sometimes you just need to block out external sources, and sometimes you just kind of have to block out certain inspirations for you to just focus on yourself. The next one I want to talk about is forcing work that isn't fun. Sometimes you can get bored with the work, or sometimes it's just work that you're just not motivated or passionate about. It happens. You have to be careful about the whole statement about making your work your passion, because the thing about work is that you're going to have to do things that you don't want to do. And that can affect your relationship with the passion of your craft, whether it's animation, whether it's art, whether it's something creative. You have to be really careful about making your passion into a career, because you could end up hating your work, which happens to be so closely related to the thing that you like. So let's say I'm burned out from work and the work that I'm doing isn't necessarily fun, or it's not something that I'm passionate about. I'll use the extra time that I have to work on something for myself that's kind of either opposite to that stuff or stuff that got me passionate about animation in the first place, and just try and do stuff with that. So if I'm working on an action show and I'm really burned out, I'm really pissed off, and I'm really tired of like this whole action genre, I'll make cartoons on the side or drawings on the side that's just like stupid, goofy, funny things that is different from that. And the vice versa can happen. I'll be working on some kids show and I'm really burned out and tired from it. I'm going to spend that extra time for myself to make something that's more, epic or actiony or dramatic or even very adult. Sometimes I change things up to get out of that rut. And sometimes it's not always related to art or creative work. Sometimes it's related to something that's happening in my life, whether it's a family issue, whether it's relationship issues, or something that's going on with my health, or something that's going on with other aspects of my life is definitely seeping into my creative work. And sometimes those are things that I definitely need to address. And I feel like this could be a case-by-case specific thing for all of you guys, because we all go through stuff that's even outside of our creative work. So I think sometimes if you're getting burned out because you're thinking of the things that are happening in your life, you might need to address that. Whether it's getting some help, whether it's reaching out to a friend, you just have to resolve that, because that kind of stuff can again affect your work. So just to state again, the things that burn me out with my creative work is dealing with ambitious projects, thinking about the amount of labor, being a perfectionist, maybe you're just out of creative juice and ideas, maybe you're constantly thinking about impressing and winning approval, you're forcing work that isn't fun, you're dealing with a toxic community, or there's stuff that's happening in your personal life that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of different causes for burnout, and I feel like each of those requires very specific solutions, because one solution for dealing with burnout isn't going to work for anyone else that is going through a burnout, because their burnout might be different from your burnout. And I think I wanted to share this because I've noticed that I've been burned out for different reasons in the past. Now, some of you guys watching this video might have different or other reasons why you're burned out, and feel free to share that in the comments, what you did to navigate through that, because I think it'll help a lot of people. I think it'll be a good discussion. The thing I like about my channel is that a lot of people start conversations and discussions in the comments, so feel free to leave that. Thanks, bye. Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.